I always believe in collaborations. I feel that creating connections, it means a lot, even for a brand.
Collaborations work best when it's almost like from two separate worlds coming together and seeing kind of what can be born out of that.
Hi, this is Imran Ahmed, founder and CEO of the Business of Fashion. Welcome to the BoF Podcast. It's Friday, June 11th. This week, our editor-at-large, Tim Blanks, has the pleasure of speaking with two of the industry's most respected and watched designers, Valentino's Pierpaolo Piccioli and the menswear designer Craig Green, who spoke about their new creative collaboration, reimagining Valentino's rockstud. The rockstud has become a brand icon for Valentino, and to mark its 10th anniversary, Piccioli was looking for a way of reinterpreting an established symbol and thought that partnering with another designer could help give the rockstud a different meaning. Here's Pierpaolo Piccioli and Craig Green inside fashion.
Welcome, Craig, Pierpaolo. We're going to talk today about one of the most interesting collaborations I think I've come across in an era when everybody is talking about collaborations. The whole notion of working together has obviously become a huge thing over the course of the pandemic, when people are looking for their own approaches to trying to find their way into a very uncertain future. And working with other people seems to be something that people have settled on, which I really like. It seems such an obvious thing, but this collaboration doesn't strike me as obvious. So I want to know right away, how did this happen?
Yes, I always believed in collaborations. I feel that creating connections and real it means a lot, even for a brand. I did different kind of collaboration with Juno from Undercover, with Birkenstock, with Levi's, but I think they're kind of different kind of collaboration, even if sense is almost the same. It's like to give a different perspective on the brand I'm working on. And I wanted to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Rockstud, collaborating with real creative people, and that I really love. I feel that every collaboration has to be born from something that is really personal. And I think that Craig is one of the most talented, creative, and pure creative. So I wanted to give him the opportunity to work on the same kind of recipe, the studs, working on something that can be different, but not like a marketing collaboration. I wanted to have like a creative collaboration, which is completely different. And that's why Craig is the first of this collaboration that I hope can be done on Rockstud, because I follow Craig since the very beginning. I feel that he represents the pure creativity. That's what I like from him. And I love him as person, because this is also important for me. And to create connection, I knew him even before. We worked together on different projects on Moncler Genius. And so we had the opportunity to know each other. And we had when you have something personal together, even if from different cultures, different ages, different identities, but we get connected immediately. And so for me, it came easily the idea to work with Craig and to give him the rockstud recipe in order to create something new with Craig creativity plus Valentino rockstud.
Now, I think that I guess when I think back, it was that Moncler Genius moment where you both made collections. You both made stunning collections for Moncler. I imagine the two of you looking at each other's work and just being, well, appropriately impressed. So was it that moment where you actually thought, I'm curious about whether you recognized a kindred spirit, or you just thought that is so extraordinary that I can relate to it on that level? I mean,
we met, you remember, Craig, the night before when we were when we were building our installations for Craig. And I told Craig, I want to come at yours because I wanna see what you did. And so we met in the middle of this huge space, and we did our visit one to the other. We have been like the guide of our space, our own spaces. And I felt that his installation was super fantastic and inspiring. That's what I recognize from Craig. I recognize the creativity as something very pure and radical, and not a marketing creativity, but is something pure that comes from inside. And I think it's not as common today to have creative as talented, creative, and also imaginative and oniric and dreaming as Craig. He's even if so contemporary.
I mean, that's a very complimentary coming from you. You're making me feel shy.
He knows that. He knows what I think, and I know also his works, of course, in the shows, and always I'm a fan of his work, even as a consumer. I'm wearing one of your.
But Craig, you know that first Genius thing where you walked into Pierpaolo's installation, and it was just so. It was the notion of the puffer jacket, that sort of element of Moncler just exploded in 100 different directions. When you looked at that, I'm curious. I'm going back to this kindred spirit idea. When you looked at that, did you think there is somebody who really thinks out of the box? You know, who like you do? What were your impressions when you saw that then?
I remember the day that I arrived, and I was wondering whose installation was in the center, because it was almost like a tower, but there was nothing inside it when I got there. So I was waiting throughout the day for them to deliver the installation. And then when I saw it, I was convinced that I was looking at everyone's, and then I was like, oh, Pierpaolo definitely won. I think his was definitely the best. And then we hadn't actually met by that point yet. And it wasn't until later that afternoon we met each other. And from that moment, I think we just got along. There was something about, we just had an energy together, I think. I think it's rare in fashion to find people that you get along with so instantly and easily. Just that kind of business, isn't it? But
I love what Craig. I always loved what Craig used to do. But when I met him, I felt that there was a connection, a personal connection, and sometimes this is even more important, because I recognize that the work I admire was coming from a person who was really creative and authentic. I feel that collaboration can work when you have identities very precise and very even different one from the other. Because I don't think that collaboration works when you are kind of similar. I think that it works more when you have different identities, very precise but very different identities. And so what comes from two minds is really the addiction of two minds.
I mean, I feel exactly the same, because I guess if you looked at the end results of what we both do, it's quite different, or it is quite different when you look at it instantly. But I think there's a lot of similarities in the way that we work and what we find important and what we value. And I think you find that a lot in creatives that can get along in that way.
I think there's a kind of humanity that links the two of us. Even if the result is different, our creative process is not as different. We really start thinking and dreaming about
the story, the fantasy, and also like the details.
It's not the product itself, the first thought, but it's the fantasy, it's the message to deliver. And also in the process, during the process, there's a lot of humanity that becomes part of the final project. That's what we experienced, I think.
I'm curious about the fantasy, though. I mean, Pierpaolo, I can see the fantasy in your work, although lately you talk much more about grounding things, that you when you talk about couture, you want to ground couture. But Craig, do you see your work as having a fantasy component?
Oh, definitely. I mean, what's important to me is, it's always been important to me, like a show, which is something that I've missed during this period. But, like the feeling of a show, the emotion that you can, maybe it's not an obvious fantasy way, but it's definitely an escapism in it, or like a removing yourself from reality in some way. I would say there was a fantasy aspect to my work, definitely. I mean, I think.
Even if then the product becomes also real, but that's nothing bad in this. Mm-hmm. I feel that the fantasy is part of the product, and it's like as my job, my process is like solving that kind of complexity into something that can become simple, but comes from a fantasy and not from a product in your mind. I think that creativity is about that kind of process, thinking with a dream and becoming into something which is real and desirable, but becoming from a dream, not from the product itself.
I guess I'm tripping up on the word fantasy just because I see when I look at Craig's work, I see spirituality. And I guess in a way, if we're talking about escape, I guess that is escape as well. That's escape like fantasy. And I suppose there's an intense spirituality in what you do as well, Pierpaolo. I think that there's a sense of time, but timelessness. A sort of historical spread, past, present, and future, all fusing together. I think that's what both of you actually do. And now I'm rationalizing the collaboration in my mind. I can see all these similarities, of course.
But in a way, I think that all of us are trying to catch the spirit of times, but trying to do something which is going to be timeless. I think that's maybe the real dichotomy between the zeitgeist and the timeless objects. You work in the moment, and I think you definitely have to be part of the moment. You have to witness the moment. But our dream is to create something that is part of the moment but can become timeless.
And that's what I always loved about being, or the idea of being a fashion designer, that you have the reality of people, or the reality of a human, and then whatever you do in a fantasy, whatever you put alongside it on that human, it already has like that sense of reality anyway. In some way.
So what you're saying is everything is always grounded, which is everything is ultimately always grounded, which is a perfect way to introduce the actual fruit of your collaboration, which is a sneaker.
Yeah, it's a real contemporary object. It's not. That's what I really wanted to do, and we agreed about this. That we didn't want to do a fantasy object. We wanted to do an object that could be unisex, with no idea of gender, race, culture, identity, whatever. And even in terms of expensiveness, it's going to have the price of a sneakers from a brand. So an object that can be kind of universal, even if it comes from a fantasy, and from a collaboration of two people that are two creatives and not two marketing kind of guys. And we wanted to create an object that is, because I feel that fashion is more successful when it comes from a fantasy. That's what I feel.
So when did you start creating this fantasy then? How long ago? Because we've had more than a year of complete interruption to things like collaboration became much, much more difficult with distance and isolation and so on. So how long ago did this idea actually start?
during the isolation because
it was. I think it was just before, maybe
just before the pandemic moment. I think it was February last year. Just before we started talking, and then we decided to we started working, and everything happened. But we didn't stop, and we had Zoom. Probably it would be easier to meet each other in Rome or in London, and we didn't. We just had call like we have it now.
Lots of FaceTimes, lots of calls and WhatsApps.
So you decided you wanted 10 collaborators to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Rockstud, which has become basically the emblem of your Valentino, hasn't it? It's become the sort of symbol of your Valentino. And you had a list of people, and Craig was the first person on the list, or what happened?
No, actually, we didn't plan to do a list to first doing Craig, and then maybe it would be correct to have a different one. But we decided let's start with Craig, because to me it came easily in my mind, and that was the kind of collaboration I wanted, not as I said, a branding collaboration, but creative collaboration. And then we'll see what happens. I don't want to plan and to have, say, 10 collaboration in 2 years, one each month. I learned from this moment that we don't have to plan. We have to react to what happens. So I reacted with the idea of doing collaboration. Craig was the first. I don't know who's going to be the second. Let's see.
I know when you talked about the various aspects of Valentino that you wanted to explore, and there was street, there was bourgeois, there was couture, there was punk, there were all these different facets. And that's an exciting, given that Craig was the first one, your imagination runs riot when you think about who you could approach for other collaborations, especially because this one, the shoe that you have made, is so specific. It's so special. It actually does bring together. When I talk about spiritual, this shoe to me looks like a pilgrim shoe. It looks like a pilgrim sneaker.
So true. I agree with you. And I never thought about this, but could be something spiritual, because it's there's something pure which I like in the object itself, but also in the connection we had. It was kind of pure and not. Do you agree, Craig? I think so. I think it was very authentic and spontaneous. Nothing planned. Nothing so thoughtful. It was a moment of a meeting between two people who share same passion, same love, and working on different projects.
So, Craig, were you what kind of brief were you given? What were you actually? What did Pierpaolo actually, when you talked about it? What did you decide was the best way to move forward with your contribution to this idea?
So initially, we found out about the collaboration, and when I found out it was based around the iconic detail of the Rockstud, which usually in collaborations that we've done previously, it's either based on an iconic product or an aspect of the brand that we're working with. And I found it interesting that it was, it's like something this small. So you kind of, your mind starts running away with itself. And I thought, when I first saw it, I was like, I couldn't work out exactly what we could do with the Rockstud, because I think my initial view of the Rockstud was almost like an adornment or a embellishment, or it was like, and it was an aesthetic, it was a kind of aesthetic aspect of a product. And it wasn't until I found out more about the ideas behind the Rockstud, and that it's in some way seen as a object that can fix things together. So it has like a purpose, fixing layers of fabric together or joining a garment. And it was at that moment that I realized okay, now I can understand exactly that we could almost tell a different story keeping the iconic rock stud as is, but kind of shifting what it's used for. We initially spoke about it being, I think we were focusing kind of on an accessory, but the brief was quite open. So Pierpaolo and the Valentino team, we spoke, and at first we made like proposals of different ways of, some of them were quite strange, I think, of
like
our initial.
What? Tell me, what were the strange ones?
One of them was like an orthopedic thing for your soul. It was like you never saw the rock studs, they were inside the soul, and then
like the soul, your soul, S-O-U-L or your S-O-L-E?
Oh, yeah, well, it was a play on both. So it was
it was
inside the sole of the shoe, so you never saw it outside.
Everything was kind of interesting because it was really a different perspective from what I had in my mind. So that's why I thought everything could be interesting as approach. Then we shared the one we wanted to go deeper with, but I think that there were different kind of aspects that, for different reasons, they were all interesting and to explore. But we decided to go on one object that could be more specific and even a single one, because at the beginning we didn't think if 1, 2, 3 objects. Then we decided to be focused on just one object that could be more meaningful. And
it was interesting because I think this one, so we started, one of the ideas was really about using the rock stud to protect the foot. So we liked this idea of, like it was almost like encasing the foot as like an armor to protect the wearer's foot. And I thought it was interesting that we would, like we were looking at it almost like it was it's like an industrial grip on the bottom of a shoe for walking and surfaces.
He gave me a different perspective, and Craig gave me this new perspective, which I thought it was really interesting as shifting of the meaning.
Yeah, it was nice, and I think we thought it was also interesting that it was like an integral part of the shoe. It was like a functional part of the shoe, rather than only adornment or aesthetic aspect at the same time. But it was both, which was kind of interesting, I think, to run with.
What I think is really interesting about the shoe is that, to me, it is totally Roman. It feels to me, like I said, a pilgrim shoe, but also it's a little bit gladiatorial. You said that, Craig, you said it protects the foot. So it's very Roman in that way. And Valentino is very Rome. But I think the shoe is a provocative interpretation. It's a very appropriate interpretation of Rome, but it's quite a left field interpretation of Valentino.
That was not deliberate, but it is not. I didn't think before that it was very pilgrim kind of shoe and spiritual, but maybe yes. That I think that we both are in our culture are there, so probably there's something Roman and something different together. And I don't know. I think it's an object that you can really define as a sneaker, as a gladiator sandal, or pilgrim shoes, or as an armor, and that's what I like. That.
But do you imagine people looking at it and people looking at it and thinking, this isn't the Valentino I know, but I really like this. So actually it's talking to a whole new audience for Valentino.
I think it can talk to people that already know studs, and they have probably objects with studs, and they already have rockstud, or even to people that don't know rockstud and maybe can approach the studs and related studs Valentino from a different point of view. When you work in a brand like this with a lot of signs that you already know as studs, but as bows, roses, whatever, I think it's very important to give and to shift the signs that you already know, giving them a different meaning that is more of the moment. because otherwise, if you use this sign as part of the identity and as they are, with a sort of reverence, it can become very nostalgic. But if you use the sign, giving them a different moment, it's like taking away the old meanings and leaving exactly as they are, by giving them a new aesthetic, a new vibes, a new life, more of the moment. I think people will see them from a different perspective, and so they become different, even if they are the same. I think that's important. Is about the eyes who will look at the things from a different perspective. And to me, this is important not only for this. It's important for the work I'm doing on Valentino, because I'm not going to change the signs in order to do a Valentino more relevant or more of the moment today. I want to use the same objects, the same signs, but I want to give them a different meaning. We talked many times, but Valentino was very known as exclusive world of couture, the very exclusive lifestyle of people. I want to I prefer to talk about community of people that share values rather than surfaces.
So the sign you're talking about here is the rockstud, in other words, and then re-signing it by using designers like Craig to reconceptualize it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of an interesting thing for you, Craig, because I think about how defined your aesthetic is in the minds of people. And working with a brand like Valentino, which is so established and so so classic in a way, whether that makes you rethink your own brand and what you could do to change people's perceptions of how they view you.
Like the opportunity to work with somebody like Pierpaolo and the House of Valentino is, I guess it kind of goes back to what we spoke about earlier about, collaborations work best when it's almost like from two separate worlds coming together and seeing kind of what can be born out of that. And I think that's how we kind of ran with it as well. Like, I like the challenge and I like the restriction as well. I like that it was just based on the rockstud. It's kind of so restrictive, but that's what's so great about it, that what can you make within the restrictions of one kind of detail? And with every person that you work with, especially working with someone like Pierpaolo, you learn a lot. You kind of inevitably change in the future what you plan to do, because I don't think you ever stop learning, do you?
When you talk about the other things that you want to focus on with Rockstud X, the anniversary, there's a couture element, but there's a punk side. You love to surprise people. And was that a sort of element in this? People are going to be surprised, I think.
I don't know if I want to get myself surprised first. I want to push my boundaries. I want to go forward. And then if this aspect will allow people to get surprised, it's perfect. But I don't start from the reaction I want to have from people. I start from myself and from my kind of path.
It looks like a shoe for a devotee, It's very solid, and it's quite defensive with the rim of studs. I find the stud a very aggressive thing. I mean, it just is. You wouldn't say the stud. You would never say that particular stud outlining the doors of Palazzi in Rome. Protective, defensive, and gladiatorial, I think. There's something very gladiatorial about a stud. I mean, and also the way you've used it in the shoe. It's big. It's big and definite, and
it's not shy.
It looks like you could walk 1,000 miles in that shoe, which is, again, pilgrims. You head out with a goal. Actually, and another reason why I think that is kind of intriguing is how much you felt this shoe looks like the result of everything we've just been through over the past year. How much maybe subliminally, subconsciously, this shoe embodies what we've been through, that people could look at this collaboration and say, yes, that could only have happened now. Do you think about that at all?
I mean, I hadn't until now, but I guess I think what's also, because you were saying about how like strong and solid it looks, but I think that's also fragility, as Pierpaolo said in it, because the upper is, I think what's really interesting about it is how protective and, I guess you say, like definite the sole looks, but the upper is so, it's kind of there just to hold the sole onto the foot in some way, but then creates like an aesthetic aspect of it. But it's quite fragile. It's like it's like a knitted upper with,
which to me is
kind of a delicate lace, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
I think that more delicate aspect mixed with the brutalness of the sole, I think is, I guess, kind of defines what our collaboration really became.
But it's something you've always done in your menswear, that you've heightened vulnerability but emphasized strength. I mean,
there's strength in vulnerability.
You what?
I think there's strength in vulnerability.
I come back to that idea of the pilgrim. How many collections have you done where I feel like they're pilgrimages? I feel like there's some kind of pilgrimage. And I've loved that idea. It's why people cry at your shows. And then Pierpaolo does this other thing. He makes people cry through just ravishing beauty. And people are just, the audience just sits there and they're just, what is this? This is not what we're used to seeing, I think
such a strength in the beauty. Like that, I always think with Pierpaolo's shows and work, it's incredibly beautiful, but there is like a strength there, like I see anyway in the work. It's not purely fragile, I don't think.
Pierpaolo's thinking about that.
No, I'm not thinking. I'm pretty sure that I love the strength of fragility, of vulnerability. I think that is fragile doesn't mean not strong.
Mm-hmm.
Fragile can mean delicate, can mean to be vulnerable, and even proud to show your vulnerability, and even proud to be vulnerable and strong at the same time. Why not? I don't think that if delicacy and kindness, and gentleness can be strong, I don't think that being assertive doesn't mean to be authoritarist. I think that you can be fragile and vulnerable and assertive at the same time. Why not? And so in my show, I want to arrive with the beauty of the emotions, not just with a bidimensional beauty. My dream is to deliver something to think about, also that touches you inside, and not only the beauty is a language, but the message is not the beauty. It's something that is beyond beauty. But you need to see beauty in order to arrive to beyond beauty.
What do you think is the message of this shoe? That sounds so bizarre to say that, but I mean, it's definitely is a shoe with something to say.
It's an object that becomes from two creative people that respect each other, and it's an object that can be universal with no boundaries of any kind of gender, sex, whatever, and it's universal even from it's catching the time, the zeitgeist, but it can be timeless.
Which also takes me back to that thing I was saying that you didn't respond to directly, but the notion that you could only have done something like this now, that there's something about this, the sort of the shoe says resilience, doesn't it? It says keeping on. It has that sort of, it has a kind of strength that when you look at it, when you look at the shoe, you will remember this moment. And it will define this moment in some way, which is a really interesting challenge for you, Pierpaolo, because how do you carry that forward into your next collaborations on Rockstud X? How do you manage to embody all of everything that the shoe says with your next collab, which might be couture, or it might be bourgeois, or it might be all those other things you've talked about? How do you envisage this going forward?
I'm not planning actually, but I think that I will keep this moment as I feel that I learned a lot from this moment. I think you can have opportunities when time is tougher, because you can learn to react, just to react, not to plan, to react with your own sensibility, and you learn even to be more radical and more assertive, more strong, because you need to react in a different way. And I feel that our next collaboration, I don't know, but I feel that I want to be focused for sure, as this collaboration was, because it was coming from a personal approach, but it's the object is going to talk about us, but also about the moment and the people that will deliver this object.
Craig, how do you feel on about that what Pierpaolo was just saying?
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, it's a different. I think this year or this moment, I think everyone's changed. I don't think anyone's the same as they were February last year. I think even if they say they are, I don't believe that everyone is the same. I think it's affected people in a lot of different ways, and not only negative, not only positive, but like these moments are times to rethink everything and define things in a different way. Yeah, and find opportunity in the moment.
So I have one last question for both of you. Pierpaolo first. What do you take away from this experience?
I love human and love person before everything else. And sometimes when you see works, I'm sure that works reflect the people that do the work.
Craig?
I mean, for me, I think it just kind of, it solidified how much I love Pierpaolo as a person and as a creative, but also that, a collaboration can come out of two very different places, like from my East London studio to Rome, working on a design together. I think if you're a designer and you have, like how Pierpaolo is, you have similar values, and you can make something together that makes sense for both of us, I think.
So all power to the collaboration. Thank you both very much.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the BoF Podcast for our look inside fashion and how it connects to currents in the wider world. If you're not yet a BoF professional member, join today with our 30-day risk-free trial and benefit from exclusive access to agenda-setting analysis you won't find anywhere else. The BoF Podcast is edited and produced by Emma Clark, Kate Vartan, and Kevin Bobby Blanco in the BoF studio team.